gosh, I need to do this and this and this, and I'm running out of time, and Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Emma here, and today I've finally managed to get around to filming the Cambridge University Q&A that I asked you guys to submit questions for over on my Instagram. So thank you so much to everybody who submitted questions. As I said over there, this will be a mix of school questions, university, my experience, social life. So I'll sort of start at the beginning because a lot of you wanted to know a bit of background into how I managed to study English at Cambridge, why I ended up studying English, about my A-levels and things. So one of the questions I got quite frequently was, what A-levels did you take? So I took English literature, philosophy and ethics, which is sometimes known as religious studies, German and art for my A-levels. And as I said in my last Q&A, I actually thought I wanted to study art at university, not English, so head over there if you want the full answer for that. But I did change my mind after doing well in some mock exams in year 12, I think, and I started to realise actually I love reading, and I'd been on a couple of trips to Cambridge and realised that's the university I want to go to, and the English course just looked so interesting to me, so that's why I decided to go with English instead. So on the back of that, some of you wanted to know what grades I got in my A-levels. So I actually got 2 A stars, an A and a B. The 2 A stars were in English literature and philosophy and ethics. The A was in art and the B was in German. Though if I remember correctly, I was only a mark or 2 off an A and I didn't realise and never sent away my papers to be remarked. And once I found out how close I was to the A, I was so disappointed and I wished I'd had the opportunity to get my papers remarked. But I actually wasn't hoping for anything more than a B in German. I mean, an A would have been lovely, yes. But I did struggle quite a bit with German at A-level because I was trying to balance 4 subjects instead of 3, which people usually take at A-level. I think I was the only person in my year group that did 4 A-levels, or maybe there was one other girl. As things go, people tend to take 3 A-levels, so I was trying to balance 4 at the same time, and I knew German was maybe trickier, language learning takes a longer amount of time, so all in all, I was happy with the B, and that's what I expected and what I wanted, but the A would have been the cherry on top of the cake. The next question is, which universities did you consider other than Cambridge University? So obviously in the UK, when you submit your application to apply for university, I think you have to put 5 different choices down, right? So Cambridge University was obviously my first choice, but the other 4 universities that I applied for were the University of York, Durham, Newcastle and Warwick. So obviously I'm from Newcastle. There's actually quite a big range of northern universities in there, York, Durham, Newcastle. I didn't realise that. But obviously Cambridge was the one I really wanted to go to. So Cambridge was my firm choice and York was my insurance. I would have put Durham as my insurance, but I wasn't completely sold on the culture or the environment. I went to a couple of open days there, a couple of talks, and I just didn't really vibe with the place. Like, I would have liked to have had it as my insurance because I like the collegiate system and I like the strong emphasis on academia and hard work, and I like that intensity and the hard work environment of Cambridge. I know, call me crazy. It actually had the same entry requirements as Cambridge, so they both required 1 A star and 2 A's, which obviously I surpassed, but that is the minimum requirement to do English at both of those. So obviously if I didn't get the grades for Cambridge and Durham was my insurance, I wouldn't have got the grades for Durham either. So I needed an insurance with lower grades than Cambridge, which was York, and that was 3 A's. And I really loved York. I always said to myself, if I don't get into Cambridge, I wouldn't be disappointed to go to York. Like, I'd be disappointed I didn't get into Cambridge, obviously. But as things go, I really did love York. I liked the campus, I liked the environment, I thought the city was beautiful. I love that, like, oldie-worldy sort of architecture and stuff, so I think I really would have fit in well there, but my heart was completely set on Cambridge. So another question that I do get asked quite a lot about Cambridge, and it's probably the stereotype question that everybody sort of has in their minds of what Cambridge is like, is it stressful? And the answer in a nutshell is yes. It's very stressful. It's a lot of work. It's just go, go, go all the time. And especially during my own degree, English, I had to learn to manage my own time really well because I might not have had as many lectures as my friends who were doing maybe science subjects and things, who were always in labs and lectures. But it's kind of just as stressful having fewer contact hours, but having to learn where to place my time. Like, I had to manage all of that myself, right? I'm going to spend this many hours researching, this many hours in the library, this many hours at lectures, then I'm going to spend this many hours planning my essay and writing it. So it was a lot of like planning and responsibility on me because I didn't have lecturers and timetables to schedule all of that for me. So yes, it is definitely stressful. And another question I had is, how do I manage that stress, or how did I find coping with things? What coping mechanisms did I have? And I definitely say I maybe have a tendency to go towards maybe more unhealthy coping mechanisms, like pushing myself to work harder. So I think it's important to get a balance. I think when I was stressed about work, in my mind, I just had to sit down and get it all done, write a list of everything I needed to do and just tick it off and go, go, go. And that's kind of how I did things in my first year. And it meant I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to work harder. I felt like an imposter and I didn't deserve to be there. So that did mean that I was maybe doing more work than everybody else was, or my peers were doing, and was spending so much time in the libraries, reading way more than what I needed to, going above and beyond the reading list, and I just didn't have to. And my professor said this to me, like, Emma, calm down, you do deserve to be here, you are worth it, like, we picked you for a reason and we made the right choice, so don't feel like you need to overwork yourself to prove yourself. And as soon as I had that in my mind, I started to develop healthier coping mechanisms and healthier ways of dealing with stress. Like, if I could feel myself getting really, really anxious to the point where I felt like I couldn't cope with it, and I wasn't staying, I'd never fall behind on things. I was never the type of person to fall behind. I was too, like, punctual and organised for that. But there was definitely a point where my mind would be like, there's too much going on in here right now. And I definitely learned from Cambridge, particularly in my second year, to go, you're too stressed right now. You're not going to be doing effective work. You're not going to be doing effective revision. It's not going to stick if you're feeling this distressed and worried about trying to cram as much as you can. Take a step back, because taking half an hour to an hour out to sit with friends and chat with people, go for a walk, get fresh air, take exercise, and then coming back to it meant I was doing so much better work. My brain felt clearer. I wasn't thinking, gosh, I need to do this and this and this, and I'm running out of time. And when you go into panic mode like that, you're not doing productive work. So I can't tell you enough how important it is to take breaks and establish healthy coping mechanisms. Don't do what I did, where you just throw yourself into work. Obviously, to some extent, that is a good thing if you do it within reason, and it can definitely alleviate some of your stress if you get a lot of your tasks done and you're ahead of time, or you're on time for your deadlines and things. But don't do it to the point where you're staying up and losing out on sleep, you're not eating properly, not looking after yourself properly. That's one thing I always made sure I did: eat properly, sleep properly. I never stayed up late in the libraries. I'd work from about 8:30 in the morning to 8:30 at night. Maybe not even as late as that. Some nights I'd like have dinner at 6 and just stop after that, because I needed that time in the evenings for myself to wind down, jump in the shower, watch a film, chat with friends, and just relax, because that's when you do your best work. So the next question is, how did you prepare for tests? How many hours did you spend studying? Which I've kind of given an answer for that in what I've just said. But just to reiterate, I do about 8 hours a day, Monday to Friday. As I said, I'd work from 8:30 in the morning till 8:30 at night, but I did break that up with maybe an hour lunch, an hour for dinner, a couple of 15-minute to half an hour breaks during the day, just to give myself time away from work, recharge my battery so I could jump back in again. And then on weekends, I do about 4 hours on Saturday and 4 hours on Sunday, because I like to have some time away from work so I could go to like my choir rehearsals, go out with friends for ice cream and dinner, and go on runs and things, just to make sure that I was definitely giving myself the breaks that I needed. I think in terms of how did I study, I was definitely a hard worker, a bit of a workaholic. Throughout the year, I would make notes of like the texts I enjoyed reading, the texts I wanted to use in my exams. I'd make sure I had all of my sticky notes in the pages in my books where the good quotes were and things, or write down books I didn't have a chance to read yet that I could come back to when I was revising. So when it got to revision period, it wasn't like completely new to me, where I was like, where do I even start? I'd already been accumulating the resources as I went, which I think is a really good tactic. Like, don't let it slip from your brain. Like, you will forget later on, so make sure you write it down as you go. So yeah, normally by the time I got to exam season, I could say, I think I'm really strong in this module, but I can't really remember much from this module. So I'll go and look at the resources I wrote down to come back to and use that as a starting point. Obviously, all of my stuff was in ring binders that you can kind of see over my shoulder. Make sure you keep those neat and tidy throughout the year as well. Make sure everything's filed in the right place, stored on your computer in the right folders under sensible names. I know that sounds obvious, but some people forget to do it in the rush of keeping up with uni, right? So make sure you do that as you go, or at least have check-ins for yourself throughout the year where you say, oh, today is a sort through my folders kind of day, because you'll thank yourself for it when you get to exam term. The amount of times I said, thank thank you, past Emma, for preparing all of these materials for me to come back to. So yeah, I think prepare as you go, and timetable. As I said in my productivity tips video, don't waste all of your time making a nice, colourful, highlighted timetable that you're then going to disregard. I think it's far better to just quickly mock something up in pencil, get like a calendar and say, these are the days I'll do this, and like block it out. But I never stuck to strict timelines. I never said from 9 a.m. till 10 a.m. I'll do this, from 10 a.m. till 12, like lunch, I'll do this. I'd instead just say this day is dedicated to module 1, this day is dedicated to module 2, and I could just do whatever I wanted within that day related to that module. Obviously, I had to know that I was ticking off everything and making sure I'd revised everything I needed to, but it often puts more stress and pressure on you when you make lists for yourself that you can't fulfill. So I think that's a better way to do it. Just try and keep it free and flexible, but make sure you have enough time to get through before your exams. The next question is, what was your favourite place to study? So for the most part, I preferred studying in my room than the library. I think the library was quite stressful for me. When you see everybody else sort of like head down, like writing and concentrating, you're kind of like, God, like I'm not working as hard as they are. I'm not concentrating as much as they are. But for the most part, they'll probably be feeling the same thing about you too when they see you working. So I didn't really like working around other people because it did stress me out. That said, in my second year when I was writing my dissertation, I did like to sit in the library a lot because I was constantly needing to get up and find new books everywhere. So I'd work either in my college library or in my university library. And it meant that if I was writing an essay or a bit of my dissertation or something, I could say, oh, I could really do with this book. Let me just look up where the book is stored, what the reference number is, and I just get up, grab it, look through, that's the bit I need, and then keep writing. And it meant my flow wasn't interrupted. And I also liked to work in my room for a large part of the time, but if it got too tiring and I was sick of seeing the same environment, it might be a nice break to actually come out, walk to the library, try something new just for an hour or two, and then come back to my room again to see a change of scenery and keep my brain like refreshed. The next question was, were you obsessive with good grades? I suppose I've already answered this indirectly by telling you what sort of a worker I was like at Cambridge, but yes, I was very obsessive with good grades, and I'm a massive perfectionist. Like I put all the stress and pressure on myself. Nobody else did that to me. I was just like, it's not good enough. You've got to do your best, which is not healthy. Please don't put that kind of pressure on yourselves. But yes, to answer the question, I did want to achieve good grades. I knew I was at Cambridge for the academic side of things. Some people go for the social scene as well, but I knew that the academic side was why I was there, and it was my biggest goal to do well academically. And that kind of leads me onto my next question, which is, what grade or class did you graduate with when you left Cambridge? So I'm not sure if any of you know how the UK grading system works at university, but the idea is you have a first class, a second class, a third class, and a fail, I think for most universities. First class is the top grade you can get, fail obviously at the bottom. Usually the second class is broken up into a 2-1 and a 2-2, or an upper second and a lower second. And throughout my time at Cambridge, I actually got a first class every single year of my degree. I don't know how I did it. I mean, it is down to my hard work, I'm sure, and all of the help from my professors and my peers and my family and friends for supporting me. But yes, I got a first class every single year through my degree, which meant I graduated with a double first class honours. You might be wondering why it's double and not triple, but that's because the way the Cambridge course is broken up. So the English course is broken up into part 1 and part 2. So your first 2 years are part 1 and your final year is part 2. And because I got a first in both parts of my degree, I got a double first. So the next question is more about advice. So what advice would I give to my fresher self, or if I could do anything differently, what would I do? And I definitely think that I've touched on this in my channel before, but I definitely say work less. Stop putting so much pressure on yourself. Believe in yourself. Girl, you deserve to be there. You've worked so hard and it all pays off in the end. So don't worry. And I really wish I'd thrown myself into things more. I wish I'd stepped out of my comfort zone more. I really regret not signing up for more societies in first year, not going on more nights out, not like going along to social events that the college had arranged, because I really wish I'd taken that opportunity to meet new people and make new friends. I didn't feel like I really settled into Cambridge until my second year, which obviously I wouldn't change it if I could, because everything happens for a reason, and I might not have met the friends I have now if it wasn't for a bad experience in first year, or not necessarily a bad experience, but just holding myself back a bit. And I'm glad I had that learning curve, because it means later on in life I won't make the same mistake, like in my new job, for example, or in future social settings. I won't hold myself back. I will try and throw myself into as much as I possibly can. So the next question is, what were your favourite topics? What were your favourite modules that you studied at the University of Cambridge? And I think it's best to preface this question by telling you about what the Cambridge course is actually like for English. I'll do a more in-depth video, I think, about English at Cambridge, my interview experience, and the sort of course that we followed and the topics I picked throughout. But to briefly describe it, the Cambridge course runs from medieval to present day, so you have to study literature along that timeline and make sure you have a broad overview over everything, and you do that for your first 2 years. So in my first year, I studied medieval, Renaissance, Shakespeare, and then in second year I did like the Romantic period and the modern period, which I actually did coursework on those two instead and exams on the first three. And then in your third year, you specialise a bit more, you have more choice on what you write your dissertations on. So I definitely liked third year the most, because I'd spent 2 years working out which time periods, which authors I liked the most, and then I could pick to study those or go back to them or study new authors from those time periods in my third year. But my favourite papers to study were the tragedy paper, which is compulsory for everybody in their final year, and the lyric paper, which was my paper of choice. And I loved both of those modules. Tragedy, I don't want to sound dramatic and say tragedy changed me, but it really changed my perspective on the world, current affairs, history. It was just a big paper where you studied tragic literature. So it was compulsory that you referenced Greek tragedies and Shakespearean tragedies in your exam, and then you could read any other tragedies outside of that you wanted to study. So I used it as an opportunity to look more into tragic poetry and things, and I just thought it was so interesting. The critical commentary was really interesting because it's relevant, and you learn about human emotion and how we respond to tragedy and theories of tragedy and Aristotle and philosophy. And it was just a point in my degree where it felt like I wasn't just doing literature anymore. I was taking bits of everything: history, philosophy, science, theory, all of it. And it was really eye-opening, I'd say. And then as for lyric, obviously I love poetry. Lyric doesn't just mean like songs, it can be anything that is classed as a lyric poem, which is quite a vague term in itself. So we'd study, what does lyric actually mean? Let's look at different types of lyrics. What does a lyric need to contain to be a lyric? I did a really cool essay about possession and the idea of lyric possession and a voice inhabiting your body and speaking through you, and that was really interesting too. But I'll speak in more depth about that if you want to know more about the papers I did. I think this could definitely be a whole video in itself. I'm going to answer one more question now, because I feel like this video is definitely far too long and far too rambly and repetitive. I hope you guys have actually found this interesting. But the final question is, what did you write your dissertation or thesis on? And I actually wrote 3 dissertations throughout my time at Cambridge. I wrote one in my second year and 2 dissertations in my final year, which I have in my hands right now. So I can actually read to you what I did my dissertations on. The first one was called Philology, Etymology and Semiotics in the Poetry of Gerard Manley Hopkins. And in this dissertation, I talked about sign theory, the relationship between the spoken word, the written word, the relationship between symbols and meaning, and how words gain their meaning, if that's intrinsic or if that's something that's maybe more man-made and arbitrary. And I referenced Hopkins' religious background and things, and how religion sees the relationship between the word, obviously the word in the Bible, God, and it was a really interesting dissertation that kind of drew on a whole host of things: philology, history, etymology, language, meaning making, religion. If you'd like to know more about that, let me know in the comments below and I'll try and explain a bit better, or do a video on it, or maybe I'll publish them somewhere so you can read them. I don't know. I think I'd be a bit embarrassed to do that though, because they're just my university dissertations. They're not like published in a book somewhere. So the next dissertation I wrote was in my third year, and that was called All Tied Up with Sound, Ezra Pound, Rhythm, Meter and Translation. And this dissertation was about how we can translate rhythm and sound across languages. Ezra Pound wrote this big poem called The Cantos, so go away and look that up if you're interested. It is about 1,000 pages long. It's about this thick. You can probably see it on my shelf. It's huge. And he writes in lots of different languages. He borrows from different texts. He takes snippets from other authors' writing and sort of mashes it all up together in this giant, crazy, epic poem. And he borrows from lots of different time periods as well, lots of different languages. And he was really interested in rhythm and meter and Greek rhythms, which kind of links to what I was studying in my tragedy paper as well. So I had this really cool meeting with a professor who did classics, and he told me how Greek rhythms went and how to read Greek rhythms and scan Greek rhythms. I don't know if any of you have done rhythm and meter at school, but you can sort of like mark out da-dum, 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 or whatever in a poem. It's quite difficult to explain without it sounding overly complex, but I just looked to see if when he was translating between like Greek, Latin, French, English, if he could maintain that sound throughout. And I looked at Provençal poetry and bird song, which also links to my lyric studies. As I said, everything in my third year kind of started to converge in the end as I started to carve out my own interests in literature. And my final dissertation that I wrote was called, now I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong because it's Latin, but it says Scripsi hec carmina in tabulis, Harley 2253, describe the song and the written artifact. So this was a dissertation about a medieval manuscript full of lyric poetry, again, harking back to that lyric paper that I did. And this again looked at the written word, the spoken word, and how texts were preserved during the medieval era, and how lyric poetry was transforming from something that was primarily spoken and sung into something that was written and preserved as an artifact instead, and how that means that we can, have access to these texts today because they were starting to be written down more and more. And I looked at the scribe's role in that process as someone who was responsible for the preservation of texts as well. So that was so interesting. It meant I spent a lot of time looking at old medieval manuscripts in the university library and looking up manuscripts online, and I just think it's so cool that we have access to things that were written in like the 1300s. Like, how amazing is that? It's really difficult to read though, like the calligraphy, the handwriting and things. Obviously this was a time before the printing press and everything was handwritten, so that was really interesting. So those are all the questions that I'm going to be answering today. I hope you found this video interesting. Let me know if you'd like me to do more Q&As. Obviously, this is the second part in my Q&A series that I said I'd do. Up next will be a job, work-life, adulting sort of Q&A. So keep an eye out for that. I'll ask on my Instagram for you to submit questions again. But for now, thanks everybody for watching. Bye.